A human peasant born on the sparsely populated world of Soma of Rit, Zannah was recruited into the Jedi Army of Light just before the final Battle of Ruusan in 1000 BBY. However, the vessel carrying her and her fellow recruits was shot down by Sith forces above Ruusan, though Zannah survived the crash, protected by La, one of the Rusanian bouncers. When her guardian was mistakenly killed by Jedi, Zannah lashed out and killed them, this demonstration of her latent power bringing her to the attention of Darth Bane. Having just engineered the destruction of the Sith Brotherhood of Darkness, Bane set about reforming the Sith Order under the rule of two, and recruited Zannah as his apprentice. Years of harsh training crafted Zannah into a manipulative seductress and a powerful Sith sorceress. In 980 BBY, she challenged Darth Bane for the mantle of Dark Lord, and after a fierce battle on the desert plains of Umbria, she emerged victorious. Taking the Iktachi Darth Cognis as her apprentice, Zannah set about fulfilling Darth Bane's imperative, the destruction of the Jedi Order and the Galactic Republic, and the perpetuation of the Sith Order via the Rule of Two. Almost a millennia passed before the schemes of Darth Bane and Zannah began to bear fruit, and into this era of darkness was born the Jedi Master Tholme. Formerly the Jedi Watchman of the Kifu sector, Tholme relinquished these duties in order to become the teacher of the young Quinlan Vos. After a failed mission resulted in Vos's amnesia, Tholme did what he could to help his former student, even retraining Vos's own Padawan, Aayla Secura, who had also fallen victim in the same mishap. During the Separatist crisis, Tholme acted as a spy master, collecting intel on the secessionist movement rising in the Outer Rim, a role he continued to play when the Clone Wars broke out. Tholme masterminded the plot to have Quinlan Vos infiltrate the inner circle of Count Dooku, the ex-Jedi leader of the Confederacy of Independent Systems and one of the primary instigators of the war. However, the scheme backfired and Vos fell to the dark side. Tholme reached out to his former student, with the situation coming to a head during the Siege of Seleucami, and Vos ultimately rejected the dark side and reaffirmed his loyalty to the Jedi. However, neither had long to celebrate their victory, as within weeks, the Sith schemes came to a head. The Jedi were accused of treason and declared enemies of state, the Galactic Republic was reformed into the Sith-controlled Galactic Empire, and Tholme only narrowly escaped death. While the specifics of his fate remain unknown, Tholme eventually passed away. His body was cremated on Anzat by his lover, Jedi Master Tra Sa. Hello, YouTube! This is Jen Sarai, the Nerd Rage Ranter, and I am presenting my latest Versus video. Here I will be debuting a character that I have long been interested in, the Jedi Spymaster Tholme. A highly unorthodox combatant who doesn't adhere to the usual rules, he proved to be a very tough nut to crack in terms of finding a suitable opponent. Hopefully, Darth Zannah was a good choice. What attracted me to this matchup is that it was a very different take on the archetypal idea of brains versus brawn, here represented by Tholme's calculating intelligence versus Zannah's raw elemental power. And with all of that out of the way, allow me to present Darth Zannah versus Tholme. As the apprentice of Darth Bane, one of the greatest lightsaber duelists of her era, Zannah inherited a rich pedigree of martial knowledge and training. Bane himself was a fierce advocate of Form 5 lightsaber combat, which he referred to as strong style, and while he did acknowledge the benefits of Surisu, or fast style as he called it, he ultimately considered its focus on technical sophistication and skill rather than rage-fueled offensives to be ill-suited for most Sith. Zannah was the exception to this, as Bane pragmatically judged that her light physique made her badly suited for the brute force methods that he typically encouraged, and so he steered her towards Surisu. The third form of classical lightsaber combat, Surisu was a purely defensive style originally designed for blast deflection. Accordingly, it was based around tight, efficient movements intended to provide maximum defensive coverage and to conserve energy, maximizing combative longevity. Among the Jedi, the style was refined to become an expression of their pacifist philosophy, though Zannah largely ignored these ideals, her application being much more pragmatically motivated. Bane trained her to rely on redirection and deflection to conserve energy, while she waited for her adversary to give in to fatigue or frustration and moving to exploit the resulting openings. To this end, her primary tools were speed, cunning, and most of all, patience. Controlling her blade with her wrists rather than her entire arm, Zannah sacrificed reach and leverage in favor of maximized precision and control, and her typical maneuver was to keep her lightsaber cycling through a constant twirling motion, using the momentum generated to deflect attacks rather than try and meet them head-on. This method was no doubt inspired by the traditional Surisu move, the Circle of Shelter. Well-developed agility allowed her to back up this technique with highly effective acrobatic evasions and recoveries. Additionally, she's proven to be effective when engaging large numbers of opponents, even multiple Jedi, and was an expert at playing adversaries against one another. For obvious reasons, blast deflection was not a big deal for her. However, while Zannah was highly skilled, her technique was still ripe with problems, due in no small part to her gross overspecialization. Her negligible physical strength prevented her from either employing or directly meeting power attacks. Deflection and evasion were her only options. Zannah only used her lightsaber for close quarters defense, relying on her force abilities to retaliate, and has consistently proven an inability to mount any sort of sustained offensive front. That isn't to say that she's incapable of using offensive sequences to finish vulnerable adversaries. She can and does, but seizing the initiative and assuming a dominant role in a contest has consistently been beyond her abilities. While Zannah was a highly intelligent fighter, she's been constantly afflicted by what I refer to as tactical tunnel vision, monomaniacally focusing on the opponent at the expense of all other factors. This sort of focus did enable her to better anticipate her opponents and exploit their mistakes, such as how she played Saro Zaj and Johan Othon against one another, but her lack of full situational awareness almost got her killed during her final duel with Darth Bane, when she failed to make note of a pair of fresh graves and lost her footing on the loose, uneven earth. Even her focus on assessing and anticipating her adversaries has been used against her, when Bane baited her into attacking him with her lightsaber by tricking her into thinking that he was at a severe disadvantage when unarmed. Her inexperience with mounting offensives, combined with Bane's superior unarmed combat skills, leveled the playing field. At the end of the day, Darth Zannah is highly skilled, but grossly overspecialized, and while she is a devastating opponent against ordinary combatants, all she can really accomplish against force-wielding lightsaber duelists of equal or near equal skill is buy herself time. As Matt Chapman noted, all she has is a shield and patience. Tholme may have a poor track record as a lightsaber duelist, but it must be remembered that he is almost consistently being pitted against preeminent sword masters. So considering how well he has acquitted himself in these contests, I think it's safe to say that, while he isn't one of the greats of his era, he is almost certainly a master in his own right. During their engagement on Bakura, Dooku noted Tholme's refined dueling skills and his overall preference for classical techniques, suggesting that he is trained in Makashi. Similarly, his heavy reliance on acrobatics and proven skill at incorporating unarmed techniques into his lightsaber sequences strongly suggested Ataru, a theory further reinforced by the fact that Tholme's former Padawan, Quinlan Vos, is a known master of the style. These two theories are not mutually exclusive, as there is a precedent for the hybridization of Forms 2 and 4, though whether or not Tholme does so is pure speculation. He is known to have studied the various fighting forms employed by formerly trained Anzadi assassins. However, beyond allowing for the use of various bladed weapons and demonstrating a clear reliance on stealth tactics, practically nothing has been established about these forms. So very much in keeping with his reputation as a Jedi Spymaster, the specifics of Tholme's martial arts training is an enigma. In my view, the best demonstration of Tholme's capabilities and attributes as a fighter came at the conclusion of his first duel with Sora Bulk on Seleucami, when Tholme levitated a number of glass shards and pulled them towards himself, forcing Bulk to leap clear, then using a precisely timed lightsaber strike to destroy them all before they hit him, then following through on this stroke to rupture a steam pipe behind him, and using the blast of steam to cover his escape. With this act, he demonstrated his skill at integrating telekinesis into his lightsaber sequences, his skill at goading and manipulating his opponents, the precision and refinement inherent to his technique itself, his skill at taking advantage of his surroundings, and most importantly, his reliance on evasion and stealth tactics. Tholme was an expert at using combat as a greater strategic tool, but he wasn't quite so masterful when it came to actually fighting. Accordingly, he didn't so much control fights as manipulate them, and generally operated best in situations that called for subtlety and tact rather than pure martial might. Hence his ability to get the drop on Anzadi master assassins, but his inability to dominate straight-up lightsaber duels. As far as basic combat effectiveness goes, Tholme doesn't have any major difficulties, displaying skill with blast deflection and a solid level of effectiveness against multiple opponents and groups. During the Battle of Seleucami, Tholme, alongside Quinlan Vos, engaged and defeated several Anzadi master assassins. In regards to his knowledge of alternative combat techniques, Tholme added to his skill with unarmed combat with expertise in the use of improvised weapons and staves, using an uprooted bamboo-like plant as a quarterstaff on one occasion. Like any good duelist, Tholme tailored his responses to suit the situation and the opponent. But like any good Jedi, he preferred to show restraint whenever possible, and has proven his skill at subduing his adversaries through non-lethal means. That being said, he won't flinch when violence is called for, and is perfectly willing to meet his opponents head-to-head. When incapable of overwhelming his adversaries, he falls back on evasion, giving ground while either waiting for them to make an error that he can exploit, or looking for a way to make his own escape. While no coward, if he can't win, he prefers to cut his losses and flee. As martial artists, Darth Zannah and Tholme are very similar, in that both are survivalists first and foremost, and often rely on alternative means to secure victory. However, unlike Zannah, Tholme was able to maintain this defensive focus without sacrificing his offensive viability, and is a much more well-rounded combatant. But Zannah's almost monomaniacal focus on defensive technique means that Tholme doesn't have a snowflake's chance in hell of defeating her purely through lightsaber combat, as she can deal with everything he is bringing to the table. Rather, Tholme's advantage is his greater level of tactical ingenuity and creativity. As previously mentioned, Zannah was a painfully straightforward combatant who only employed her lightsaber as a shield to buy time while she prepped her Sith spells. While Tholme wouldn't be able to defeat her outright in a head-to-head match, his reliance on stealth tactics and his ability to take advantage of his surroundings means that he would be able to outmaneuver, outwit, and entrap her. And in an overall sense, he is the more viable lightsaber duelist. Tholme gets the edge as a martial artist. A human female, Darth Zannah was in her early 30s when she attained the mantle of Dark Lord. Tholme was a human male in his mid-60s by the time of the Great Jedi Purge. Noted for her athleticism, Zannah possessed a high level of agility and stamina, but due to her light build, she lacked strength and endurance. While she doesn't go to pieces under strain, she is not the sort of person who can bounce back from grievous injury and keep on going. Tholme's limitations were of a similar nature, but they were primarily due to his old age and the lingering effects of old injuries, rather than any inherent physical deficiencies. Crushed under a pile of boulders after a failed duel with Count Dooku, Tholme came off with a shattered leg, which clearly didn't heal properly as he was forced to rely on a cane to retain mobility. While there were available cybernetics that would have allowed Tholme to regain the full use of his leg, he pridefully refused to have them installed until compelled to do so by necessity. The cybernetic grafts may appear to be a major point of vulnerability, as Sora Bulk defeated Tholme by disabling them, but I would argue otherwise. Being slashed across the knee with a lightsaber would bring down anyone, cybernetics or no. In terms of overall ability between the two of them, both are relatively fragile, but Zannah boasts a greater level of stamina and agility than her aged competition. She is especially notable for having staved off the physical degeneration brought on by deep immersion in the dark side of the Force, and was actually noted for her beauty. Darth Zannah gets the edge in terms of physical capabilities. An extremely powerful Force wielder, Darth Zannah possessed a natural affinity for Sith sorcery and magic, delving deep into the dark side of the Force to summon arcane energies capable of warping the very fabric of reality. However, to her credit, this esoteric specialization did not detract from her skills with more conventional Force abilities, though they did ultimately take back seat. She was highly skilled at employing Force-based physical augmentation to allow for various superhuman feats, and displayed a high level of skill with telekinesis and telepathy. For the most part, her applications of these powers were fairly straightforward, but they still possessed a broad range of possible uses. While evidently incapable of using physical augmentation to bolster her strength, superhuman speed and agility were her bread and butter. She typically employed telekinesis in a purely defensive and utilitarian manner, Force shields to protect against telekinetic strikes employed by opposing Force wielders, and Force pulls to retrieve her weapon when disarmed. While perfectly capable of some devastating and quite frightening telekinetic attacks, this was not her instinct. Her defensive skills were further bolstered by her mastery of battle precognition, allowing her to perceive all of the possible actions of an adversary, and her training enabled her to break down the infinite matrix of possibilities to the most likely outcomes. Telepathy was where she demonstrated the most creativity and skill, subtly influencing the emotions of her subjects, making them more inclined to agree with her suggestions, rather than dominating them outright, as the more subtle effect was more permanent. However, rather oddly for a Sith Lord, Zannah displayed no aptitude with or against Force lightning. She never conjured it, and her only defense was to absorb the bolts with her lightsaber. Due to her natural affinity with Sith sorcery, this was where she devoted the vast majority of her time and energy. She used obscure Sith spells to cloak her Force signature and hide from other Force wielders, and even used these powers to effect a false light side aura, allowing her to masquerade as a Jedi. In battle, Zannah relied primarily on mental assaults and illusions, warping the perceptions of her targets. When used offensively, the illusions work by striking at a subject's worst fears, tormenting them with visions of unimaginable horror. The effect of these images can be so profound that victims have been psychologically destroyed by them, driven into utter insanity. However, because the illusions work by playing on the fears and insecurities of a subject, they can be rendered ineffective if the fear in question is something that he or she has already come to terms with and overcome. So instead of being psychologically overwhelmed, the subject recognizes the illusions for what they are. After that, dispelling them is simply a matter of willpower. The only true offensive power that Zannah has ever used was summoning tendrils of dark side energy capable of dissolving any material, essentially physical embodiments of the destructive power of the dark side of the Force. However, Zannah was only able to utilize this ability once, due to the massive demands and labor intensity of the power, which forced her to rely on an external source of energy, in the one case the dark side nexus on Umbria. And even when provided with such an energy source, she only used it as a desperation tactic, as it demanded all of her attention and focus, leaving her vulnerable. Darth Zannah had a wide scope of abilities and unorthodox and arcane knowledge and powers at her disposal. However, she is also over-specialized and totally lacking in subtlety or creativity, employing all of her powers as blunt instruments. She blasts apart your hand, tears apart your mind, or disintegrates your body with physical manifestations of the dark side itself. She's never needed to incorporate dynamic or intricate strategies into her technique, by virtue of having the powers of chaos poised at her fingertips. Tholme was not a powerful Force wielder, but he more than made up for whatever he lacked in might, with skill, refinement, and most importantly, creativity. He was an expert at using the Force to augment his physical capabilities and allow for various superhuman feats, and he possessed a solid level of aptitude with telekinesis and various telepathic powers. In short, a basic, rudimentary skill set that was common to all Jedi. What made Tholme stand out were the varied and ingenious ways he has applied this simplistic palette of skills, and the skill with which he has integrated them into his overall fighting method. In addition to the feats of superhuman speed and agility that the Jedi are famed for, Tholme has used the Force to slow his bodily functions to a crawl, a skill typically employed as a survival technique, but he has used it to fake unconsciousness and death, even fooling a medical droid. While well versed in combative applications of telekinesis, he preferred to use precision manipulation to attack from unexpected angles and to further his control of the battlefield, the best example being the aforementioned use of glass shards against Sora Bulk on Seleucami. He added to the basic mind trick with competence in the advanced battle meditation, on several occasions working in concert with other Jedi to reinforce the focus and morale of allies. The best example being when he aided Quinlan Vos during his separate contests with the Dark Jedi Volfe Karko and Sora Bulk. As a Force wielder, Tholme is perfectly capable of operating both in a conventional offensive role and in a support role, but what he is optimized for is working independently as a tactical and defensive Force user, controlling the battlefield and harassing the enemy, rather than overwhelming them outright. To this end, one of his primary skills was concealing his Force signature from other adepts, allowing him to move about undetected. The only individual capable of piercing his cloak and tracking him down was his former Padawan, Quinlan Vos. Neither overwhelmingly powerful nor particularly advanced in his knowledge, Tholme was nonetheless a formidable and well-rounded Force wielder who knew how to use what he had to maximum effect, for all intents and purposes a one-man guerrilla army. Rather than being a true guardian of the light, he was a blade that struck out at the heart of darkness, working from the shadows and fighting fire with fire, his primary weapons being stealth and deception. Darth Zannah possessed a broad palette of abilities, but each of them had only a narrow range of possible applications, whereas Tholme's relatively narrow skill set boasted quite a broad range of possible uses. Against Tholme, and most high-level Jedi Masters for that matter, the effectiveness of Zannah's primary offensive tool, her Sith spells of fear and madness, are very much in question. As the spells work by drudging up the psychological trauma and deep-seated fears of the target, they are attacking the very thing that Jedi devote their entire lives to overcoming, meaning that even if they lack the skills and power to dispel them, they would still recognize them for what they are. Under such circumstances, Force illusions still have merit as tools of distraction, but while Zannah is known to have employed this tactic, specifically against Sero Zash on Tython, it was not part of her usual MO. In Tales of the Jedi, Nomi Sunrider was depicted employing an inwardly directed application of battle meditation to dispel Alima Kito's Sith illusions, a feat I do not consider to be outside of Tholme's capabilities, as he is also versed in battle meditation. While not bereft of subtlety in regards to her utility skills, as a combative Force wielder, Zannah employed her powers as blunt instruments. In contrast to this, Tholme employed the Force not to batter and brutalize the opponent, but to improve his own tactical viability and further his control of the battlefield. However, while this reflects well on Tholme's overall skill set, it also means that Zannah doesn't have much to worry about in regards to Tholme's offensive might. Addressing Darth Zannah versus Shaak Ti, the reason why I gave Ti the edge despite Zannah's greater knowledge base and power was because Ti was a much more versatile combative Force wielder, possessing both viable defenses against all of Zannah's powers and a broader range of attack on her end, leaving her free to batter and brutalize Zannah with relative impunity. The same element certainly comes to play in this matchup, but not nearly to the same extent due to Tholme's more strategic focus. As neither can conclusively overcome the other with their Force abilities, I will be awarding this edge on the basis of academic knowledge and understanding, and in this regard, Tholme is sorely outclassed. Darth Zannah gets the edge as a Force wielder. Darth Zannah wielded the Bane's Heart lightsaber, a custom saber staff designed specifically for the practice of Form 3 lightsaber combat. The blades were shortened to 75 centimeters, 3/4 of the standard length, which sacrificed reach and leverage in favor of control and maneuverability. While this bolstered her defensive style, it also forced her to rely on extreme close quarters combat when she finally resorted to offense. The lightsaber utilized a twin set of Sith-style synthetic lightsaber crystals, one of which was the unique Bane's Heart crystal, for which the weapon was named. One of the crystal's unique properties was that it was attuned to the owner of the lightsaber, and released electrical discharges when anyone other than the owner attempted to use the weapon, acting as a security device of sorts. The special design properties and mechanisms of Zannah's weapon put it miles ahead of Tholme's much more conventional lightsaber. While the saber staff is generally less practical than the standard lightsaber, it does provide a different set of options, some necessitated by the different moveset required for wielding a staff weapon. Plus, Zannah's lightsaber is designed specifically to bolster her fighting style, and the unique properties of the Bane's Heart crystal prevent anyone besides her from using it. The only benefit of Tholme's run-of-the-mill weapon would be his familiarity with his own handiwork. Darth Zannah gets the edge in armament and equipment. Lady Zannah may be a calculating schemer, but her approach to combat was very straightforward, clearly demonstrating the influence of Darth Bane. As a swordswoman, she may have been a dedicated Surisu specialist, but her mentality was that of a Form 5 master. The core strategy that Form 5 lightsaber combat was built around was using defensive maneuvers to set up for immediate counterattacks, enduring and powering through. And this is exactly how Zannah operates, albeit in a somewhat different fashion than is typical. I say that Zannah should be applauded for how completely she has integrated her lightsaber skills and force abilities into a broader overall fighting method, but her biggest problem is, surprisingly, how narrow her focus truly is. When denied the opportunity to employ her Sith spells, or when faced with someone who isn't susceptible to them, all she can do is hold out, and all she has available to her are desperation tactics. Darth Zannah is a Sith Inquisitor with the mentality of a Sith warrior. She is a book-smart Sith who employs her sophisticated, arcane powers in the most straightforward, brutal manner possible. Tholme is the quintessential Jedi Sentinel. While he won't shrink in the face of violence, he prefers to operate from the shadows, using his intellect rather than his lightsaber as his primary tool. Despite the suggestions of Ataru and Makashi, I believe that Tholme's true style is actually Surisu, a fighting style that facilitated survival rather than victory, a trait that essentially defined Tholme's entire approach. In contrast to Zannah's narrow focus and gross overspecialization, Tholme was the consummate strategist, a man who chooses his battles very carefully, always playing the field and looking for an angle, and he was a highly versatile combatant, his skills boasting a broad range of possible applications. When stacking their powers and skills back to back, Tholme is the more viable in an overall sense, but the devil is in the details, because Tholme's advantages are so reliant on circumstantial factors. Any environment that allows Tholme to rely on stealth tactics will automatically play to his advantage, whereas any environment that forces him to go head-to-head with Zannah will play to her advantage. And there is no middle ground between these two extremes. There is no such thing as neutral ground where these two are concerned. Realistically speaking, the vast majority of possible battlefields would reinforce Tholme, allowing him to find some way to outmaneuver and outwit Zannah. What Tholme accomplishes in this matchup is to reduce Zannah's options. By refusing to meet her head-to-head, he refuses to present an available target for her Sith spells, the effectiveness of which are already in question, and leaves her with nothing to work with but her lightsaber. That being said, Darth Zannah is still a sturdy and capable fighter despite her limitations, and if Tholme slips up in any way, then he is a dead man. But otherwise, he is the most viable combatant and the most likely to win. I declare Jedi Master Tholme the victor.